You are listening to the frame rate show of every rate frames. I'm Michael Swain, which rhymes with frame. And strange.
That's true.
Kind of. That's not true.
I'm Abe Epperson, and Abe kind of sounds like strange.
I love that.
I'm the other guy.
And together we have all the pieces we need to describe the film we're talking about today. But lo, wait! What guest through yonder window breaks?
Hark!
There's a third voice with us. Hark.
Breaking through the window.
That's right. Smash through and introduce yourself. Very
That's
special
how I
guest.
always enter rooms now, smashing through windows. I'm Clint Gage. Hi, guys.
Woo!
Hey, Clint.
If I may gush a little, formerly of Team Tiger Awesome,
Sure.
a troop I consider like a sister troop of definitely. We definitely occupied the same circles at the same time, doing roughly the same thing, and we looked over at each other's shit, and we were often like, "Hey, that was good job, guys."
Hey, that's funny. And then every time you guys reached out to ask us to be in anything that you guys were doing, it was like this giddy little thrill. As we were like, "Whew, this is gonna be fun."
Aww.
And I'll never forget the cut footage of Mundy smashing Katie Stoll's head into a door frame.
I feel like that made it.
Do you remember that?
Didn't that make it into the final cut? Actually,
Did it?
Didn't that actually? It should have. I mean, that's the kind of thing that if it happens, like you really need to include that.
Otherwise, it was in vain. Yeah,
exactly. You don't want to waste that kind of accident.
Because he clearly did it on purpose, is what you're saying. It's in vain.
No,
what's the whole point?
I still don't give Nick that much credit.
Yeah, I do. I think about that head injury more than you'd probably imagine, but that's not why. Well, head injury is a good segue into the film. We're talking Dr. Strangelove. Another Kubrick. What was I think the last Kubrick we covered was probably Shining on the Kings of King. Yes,
I think we had 2001 with Dave.
Oh, that's right. Dave picked 2001. So we usually do deep dive series based on particular auteurs. We have no Kubrick cast, but there is sort of a shadow one shaping up here. Maybe we'll eventually get Clockwork Orange, the one I really want to get. But
at the very least, you could craft a curated playlist at this point, it sounds like.
Ooh,
at the very least.
Getting there.
Damn, God, you're good at organizing tent and then slinging it to the people.
Boy, do I hate that that's where my brain went. But this is
like...
These are trying times.
Always thinking about the content.
Can we just talk about our metadata real quick, and then we'll get into it?
Hell yeah.
Well, before we get around to packaging this,
let's
sling the actual tent. Clint,
let's unpack it.
What's your experience with Dr. Strangelove, Kubrick in general? And if you wouldn't mind like nutshelling the film for people who may not be aware of it at all or its place in the zeitgeist.
So, Dr. Strangelove is, I mean, this is, or How I Stopped Worrying and Love the Bomb. And I still think I messed that up. I will mess it up every time. But
Learn to Live the Bomb.
Learn to Live the Bomb? Yeah. Let me see. I'm getting, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Love the Bomb.
We all fucked it up. Okay, great.
Every single one of us
did.
Good
start.
But it's a great start. But I remember back in high school, I would subtitle all of my, here's my excuse for getting it wrong. I would subtitle all of my English papers with some variation on this. It would be like, The Crucible, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Witchcraft.
And,
it was...
Crush the guy who's just minding his own business.
Yeah, exactly. How I Learned to love having stones placed on my chest. But so I was in high school when I first sort of coming into my own film, I was the movie guy all of a sudden. And so like I also had to like Kubrick, and Dr. Strangelove was the first one that I really liked. Like it ticks a lot of boxes for me. I think it's the one that really got me into like dark comedy and satire and all of that. And probably some of the boxes I require to be ticked by movies were probably like a list joke. I love a good list joke, and the Major Kong rattling off the contents of the survival kit on the plane is a wonderful list joke. So there's a lot of things from this movie that kind of, I don't know, that I just love. It's just a great movie. But
Yeah.
before I just start talking about random stuff there's no context for, the movie Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, as we've just found out, is basically about an airbase commander, a guy named Jack D. Ripper, who decides just on his own to launch an all-out nuclear attack on Russia by giving an order to the air wing that he's responsible for, and there's just no real coming back from it because the plan is in place to make sure that it happens if it happens, and there's all of these insane logistics, and the movie sort of follows the process of trying to kind of call the bombers back and undo this insane decision that this one guy made. And 3 Peter Sellers are there, which is always a treat. But it's I want to talk too much about it to summarize it neatly, I think is the problem.
Well,
I see.
I think you did that admirably.
So
So
you did that.
great.
We got the setup.
And
we
it's
got the
funny.
setup.
The whole thing is funny. It's nuclear apocalypse. That's funny.
that's right. Nuclear. Yeah. Sure. We
I
all
could've
agree.
Just said
Especially
that up top.
And you gave me time to look up anagrams for Dr. Strangelove, which include Dove Strangler and Grandest Lover, both of which
Okay.
tickle me.
Wow.
I feel like that could be the same guy.
yeah, I think so.
They're not
watching
mutually exclusive.
This time I was struck by how it's an archetype for 2 things that I really love. One being, like you said, the dark comedy satirical angle, which goes all the way to, I mean, inheritors today include like Iannucci, and we just covered Death of Stalin, which is so great, and reminds me a lot of Strangelove now. Watching them in close proximity, I realize the connections, and then even furthermore with the Sellers connection, it never occurred to me how much this sort of probably had to be at least a piece of giving Mike Myers the confidence that, you know what, I'm just gonna fucking play them all.
Yeah.
That's my thing.
Are you trying to draw a straight line from Dr. Strangelove to Fat Bastard?
To Pentaveret, even worse.
Yeah, the Pentaveret. Oh yeah. That line is still being drawn.
That's
Yeah,
right.
we can draw that line for sure. I mean, like Peter Sellers, that was his bit, right? That was he was like a Mike Myers in a way, because he played multiple people in Lolita, I think, and also another film, but like the producers were like, he's got to play 4 roles.
Yeah.
Because he was supposed to also be Major Kong, the pilot.
Yeah, but he got
Slim
hurt.
Pickens.
Yes, they brought Slim Pickens in to replace a 4th Peter Sellers, which honestly, Slim Pickens is just
Perfect.
just so good.
So much better.
There's
Yeah,
also
I
this
think.
guy Dimitri you keep hearing only over the phone, who I like to imagine is Peter Sellers. You just don't ever cut to him because they ran out of time.
Yeah, in a way it is, because I mean that's one of my favorite. Because also, like, meanwhile, Bob Newhart's phone bits are also one of my all-time favorite things,
Right.
and so anytime President Merkin Muffley, played by Peter Sellers, of course, is talking to Premier Kissoff. Which, by the way, the names, like the idea that all of these, they just have cartoon names, which is wonderful.
Merkin Muffley.
Merkin Muffley.
That means groin wig.
Yeah.
And like vagina hair as an
Right.
adjective.
It's basically
it's pretty mad. It's pretty mad magazine.
President Vagina Wig. Yeah.
What
but
is
anyway,
the other
that conversation that he
Buck
has?
Turgidson. Sorry,
Buck Turgidson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's even like a Colonel Bat Guano towards the end, which is like you're just not
Just
even
gave
trying
up.
at that
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just saying
I
words.
mean, Jack D. Ripper is the most on the nose one, but that could be an actual name. And
James
then
Earl Jones.
You get all the
and
way
this
to
is
Colonel Bat
Lothar
Guano.
Zog.
Wait, what? James Earl Jones's name is what?
Lothar Zog.
I don't
did
even
not
think they
gather that.
say
Is that
his
just in the
name.
credits?
They don't.
Yeah.
No, it's just in the credits.
That's amazing.
It's just hilarious.
He's barely in it, and he's so young.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so young.
It's got to be
Great,
one of his
though.
first things. I didn't look
Yeah.
that up, but
Wait, what year is it?
64?
Not now, when the movie came out. Great.
Yeah. 2022.
So color is firmly in play. So that was a choice. All right.
It
confirming.
was a
Yeah.
choice.
Yes,
it was
yes,
a choice.
Yeah. But man, as dark satire goes, like it definitely it established so much. Like even the opening shot is a narrator over a shot of clouds. Of course, in this case, it turns out to be so you can see planes suggestively refueling as if they're boning.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, that's the plane that's destined to end the world. But also, it just reminded me of nothing so much as Brazil, which is also a dark satire about how things slowly fall apart because one thing goes wrong.
Well, and that awful bureaucracy that we create ourselves that then make it impossible to not end the world. I think.
Yes.
Like there's a lot of that going on. And in Iannucci too. Like, you know, that's I hadn't thought of that until you brought that up. But yeah, I mean, Iannucci's stuff between Veep and Death of Stalin and all that, like, I mean, it's very related.
It even tracks with stuff like The Wire, or it all speaks to this death urge or the belief that we're too smart for our own good and we're therefore doomed, which is
it's
definitely
so crazy. I mean, Kubrick, I mean, Kubrick, that's the thing with Kubrick. It's like every time he made a film, 20 years later, they were still quoting it, right? Like there's so much apocalypse now in this movie, you know, with just like all the soldiers firing wildly into nonsense. Even Die Hard, if you guys remember the film Die Hard, they have the Saints Come Marching In song playing. That's like, in both films, it plays over
Die Hard with a Vengeance, actually.
That's right. Plays over like the rote like preparation by soldiers like doing their work. That seems like a reference, you know, from Die Hard.
Well, and the Ken Adam production design was just all. I mean, I think he had done a Bond movie or two at this point, but like that War Room.
Is cool.
I mean, any war
one of the
room,
coolest sets of all time.
Yeah, and like the number of just not even trying to hide the reference to Doctor Strangelove sets that you've seen. Like I saw a movie just the other day that I was like, why are you making a Doctor Strangelove reference here? Like this is clearly just a filmmaker
it's just
that's
by
like
reflex.
Yeah, it's just a filmmaker that was like, well, there's a scene in a war room, so I guess give me the Strangelove.
Right.
And it doesn't
it's
like
so
thematically or anything, like it didn't make a point out of it other than this is just what war rooms are supposed to look like in cinema language, I guess. But
I'd say that's right.
I think it's rare that you get a satire that's so spot on that there has to be, and it's certainly a function of the era, but there's a disclaimer at the beginning of this movie promising you that this is not spot on.
Yeah.
They're like, don't worry, this won't happen.
Well,
now here's a very compelling argument that this will inevitably happen someday.
Yeah. I think the movie is it works on it, and it still works today in a couple of ways that I think, I don't know, like because back in the 60s, if you were 30, you were in living memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? Like, and that's not a thing that we have anymore. So like the idea of making a dark comedy about nuclear holocaust in 1964 is, I mean, it's ballsy, right? Like, I mean, because this was also the same year that Failsafe came out. Yeah. And Failsafe and Doctor Strangelove, they were both based on books that were already popular too. And so like, you know, it was out there, and just to make a funny version of it is kind of hilariously bold.
Well, bold,
right.
Because it's the duck and cover drills are within living memory. It's like doing a school shooting movie now and somehow having it be funny and go off well, where people are like, that actually made points I can get behind. Man, you're really threading a needle there, my friend. Yeah.
But I mean, just I mean, how it leans so heavily into the absurdity of everything. Like, because the thing that strikes me about it now too is that it is a slow movie. Like it's what, an hour 30 something. I don't know. It's not a long film, but it does in some ways feel longer than, you know, A Clockwork Orange or some of his other stuff.
It feels like maybe eight one-act plays stapled together.
Yeah,
there
exactly.
really are full scenes.
There's not like a through line of of pace to the movie that I think that you don't really see movies like that much, and so it feels long by today's standards, I think. But then also, I mean, the way that everything gets so bogged down into logistics. Like, I mean, there's that scene early on when, you know, President Muffley is trying to get all the info out of Turgidson, which is a hilarious sentence. by itself. But and they just keep going, well, what about this? It's like, well, no, actually you can't do that because of this X, Y, and Z. And like, well, okay, but then how about this? It's like, no, I mean, well, there's A, B, and C, and the reason we can't do that. That's my George C. Scott mumble, by the way.
Well, we can't do that.
So like the way that they get so bogged down into like all of the checklists and all of the bureaucracy of it and all of the like, and how absurd it is. Like all of the straight versions of the story, right? The Failsafe and Red Alert, which is the book that this was based on. Like it's these like cautionary tales of like, guys, this might happen. Whereas this movie is like, guys, this might happen. And it's insane that like 3 or 4 assholes are responsible for it.
Right. And it's like, fucking funny.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You just got to laugh. Yeah.
This is how close we are. And how silly is that? Like, which is
right.
The next step that this movie takes that I think for the 60s was probably pretty insane.
Well, that's what I was going to ask is because even I was trying to think the day the earth stood still, they saved the earth at the last minute. I believe we repent or they give us a warning like, but if you keep down this road, you're going to be fucked. Is this the first like mainstream movie where it ends with, and then the world ended, the end, everyone died, the end, go home? Like
Failsafe did it, didn't it? Because they had to. Because they had to bomb Manhattan for a recompense.
To walk us back, just because people haven't seen Failsafe in today's, like most people haven't seen it. But what
did you see the live version that George Clooney did back in the 90s?
Oh, I didn't see it.
Back in the days
like
where
Noah
he was
Wiley in it.
Yeah, well, he took it was like the whole cast of ER. They were just because they did like live episodes of ER for a little bit too because Clooney was like, I don't know, my parents did it.
Funny.
So
that is so funny.
Anyway.
Yeah, but Failsafe is Sidney Lumet, who Devil Knows You're Dead. I mean, 12 Angry Men. Yeah. There's a huge pedigree, but he made this the same year. In fact, they didn't even know until they were shooting it that each other were shooting
the ants and bugs
an identical.
Yeah,
exactly. Deep Impact Armageddon, basically. But like
Volcano, Dante's
that
Peak, my friend.
That is not really satire. I mean, there's absurdity in it, but it's actually playing it straight. And the ending is super well known. It's super haunting because it's a countdown. It's like 10. 9, and it does that while it's just photos of people in New York who are just going about their day, and that like they're going to explode, and it's haunting.
Spoiler alert for a 70-year-old movie, but like, it ends with the bomb dropping in Russia and the President Henry Fonda making the deal to be like, we'll let you bomb Manhattan and we'll call it square.
Right. And so like, Kubrick had to avoid that, right? Because Kubrick was dealing with
in the zeitgeist was in that dildo doorknob.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But he had to like prepare for an audience that was now acclimated to a great fear, not only from the news and just how America was during the Cold War, but also that like recent movies are being made saying specifically this is something that you should worry about. So I think that's probably why he put the disclaimer in there like very, very loudly in the opening credits twice.
Yeah.
Well, incidentally, that's also a spoiler alert for maybe 60% of all science fiction short stories written in the 50s, the decade preceding this film coming out. So it was definitely a time of, I mean, this is huge in the public consciousness because it might end the world, so let's all write stories about it. This wasn't alone in that, but I do think Clint really puts into relief how like wild it was in making fun of it. And that almost recontextualizes it to me in a way that I'm going to mull over for some time to come. Where I'm like, so was Kubrick almost a Trey Parker figure then at this time? Because there is stuff that I think speaks to the reversal of the gravitas that I normally associate with Kubrick through things like 2001 or Eyes Wide Shut, where you're like, we're going to be fancy now and talk about serious things. It's adult time. Fancy. Let's watch Kubrick. This movie has a guy trying to get a soda out of a soda machine and it sprays him in the face, and then we slow like fade to the next scene. And like it's wild to me imagining Stanley Kubrick thinking that's really funny and going like, yes, I Stanley Kubrick have like put that in or writing that in like the Coke sprays him in the face. That's a good bit. Well, I'm Stanley Kubrick.
You wonder too, because like the book it's based on is fully it takes it seriously. Like it's a drama, and like that one pulls back. Like they don't. It ends in a way where for a minute you think that the bomb dropped, and then like 3/4 of the way through the next scene you realize that it didn't, and they're talking about how to sort of move forward after the near miss. So like the book that it's based on doesn't end the way that the movie does. But then like there are all those moments where to me it's like Kubrick was a really smart guy, but I don't think he was a funny guy. Like he's got that level of being really smart and really satirical and really like, here is specifically why it's absurd, and I'm uber talented enough to present it in a way that you guys will all get that. But then I also think it's funny to see a guy get sprayed in the face by Coke. You know, like it's like there's like that level of like,
put a dog in it.
His actual sense of humor is like dad joke humor, I think. But like,
I think that's right. Yeah.
Because but also like, thinking about the course of the movie and like all of the crazy nonsense that's happened leading up to the point where, Group Captain Lionel Mandrake, also Peter Sellers, he just needs change so that he can make a phone call to the president to stop this from happening. And he has to convince a guy named Colonel Bat Guano to shoot open a Coke machine so that he can get more quarters to pay for the collect call, because the war room won't accept the charges. And like, that's how the world is saved. And in the process, a guy gets sprayed in the face with soda.
Yeah.
And like, which that honestly, like when you put it in that way, like it doesn't feel like a joke. That feels like the natural way to end this story.
Parts of it feel...
It's just absurdity, but not really funny.
Parts of it feel really dated, especially the pacing. But then parts of it feel searingly relevant to the point that it's upsetting that it's still relevant. Like, it's very, I think, notable in this day and age that Turgidson, the guy who's actually going rogue and causing the nuclear event.
Ripper.
That's Ripper.
Ripper. I'm sorry. Turgidson is the guy in the war room trying to spin it.
Scott.
Ripper, the guy actually causing the event. His concern is the loss of male essence through the physical act of lovemaking, draining your bodily fluids, which is a total... That's nofap. Like, that's a thing. That movement it persists online, and they really believe that. And I think it's especially notable that Mandrake comes at him with logic a bit and tries to dismantle his argument, and he eventually accuses him of being a pervert, which is just like fucking Pizzagate. It's like, he even believes in the conspiracy theory, like, anyone who opposes me is a pedophile. I got to launch the nukes because they're draining our bodily fluids. And I'm just like, damn, still hits too close to home.
I have to launch the nukes because I was tired after sex.
Okay. It's worse than that because this is supposed to be a joke. That's supposed to be hilarious.
He felt a vague, hollow, empty feeling after orgasming once. And he's like, oh, I see. I have to end the world.
And he's in a position to do so. Which is like, I mean, to think that people who are in charge are any different than just regular people, I think is another sort of lesson from this movie, or not so much lesson, but another sort of like a reason for its sort of lasting relevance, right? Like, I think just knowing that okay, you're president, that doesn't mean you're not an idiot. Like, it just means that you happen to be president,
one bad
or
day
can't have exactly, yeah. So,
who's your favorite sellers in this?
Honestly, well, shoot. I want to say my favorite sellers in it is Mandrake.
Yep. I agree completely. I think Mandrake's the most underrated performance.
It's the most performance also. Like, Dr. Strangelove is only in like maybe 5 to 8 minutes of the film.
Yeah, screen time wise, I think Mandrake is the winner. Which may be why I think it, but my favorite scene is still that is Muffley on the phone with Kiss Off. Like, that's my favorite scene, I think, in the whole, because at that point he's just like
trying to calm him down,
talking that child talk to a drunk buddy tone is so good.
Yes, well, yes, it is unfortunate.
Well, don't
of course
tell
I
me.
call you no.
Don't tell me that you're sorrier than I am. Like, we can both be sorry.
I'm
like,
sorry as you
I'm
are,
as
Dimitri.
sorry as you are. Yeah, it's. Which I
they're
also
big
wonder.
babies,
Like, I think
poignant.
Bob Newhart was showing up right around the
Yeah, a little bit.
same time, or maybe I don't know. It's a chicken or the egg thing. Like, it was the '60s were hilarious with pretending to be on the phone. I guess is the point.
I think Peter Sellers is kind of the OG of that shit. He's frankly like Pink Panther and all that stuff. Like he's pretty settled in this era as like as the guy, who could do this kind of stuff, to do the bumbling kind of Mr. Bean of America.
And I love that he even paved the way for that career turn that Bill Murray has taken, and Adam Sandler to a similar degree, because then he did Being There. He's like, that's right, at the end of your career you can do these dramas. And he just really was a trailblazer, man. He did it all. I love him so
Sellers
much.
is an OG.
Him showing up for 5 minutes in in Get Back, the Beatles documentary recently, was just the funniest 5 minutes. Like, he showed up, he sat down, and he was like, "I'm leaving," and then just go. It's like, why am I here? And just took off. Yeah. I'm Peter Sellers. I don't need this.
I don't need this. Yeah, he definitely has some of the more classic lines in this. Obviously, like, "Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room." Still classic.
Movie.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's one of those lines that everybody knows, but even if they haven't seen the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
It was one of those lines that even when I was a kid watching this, it was like, when they said that line, I was like, oh, that's what this is from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There are also, watching this movie for the first time, so many Simpsons jokes that I all of a sudden got.
Yeah, they love the Simpsons. Absolutely love Kubrick. It's like in their DNA to make fun of Kubrick. There is quite a bit. I kind of want to still talk about the satire of this, because I mean, like, Kubrick is not funny.
But it's clear. It's like a political cartoon come to life.
And there's interviews about him about tackling satire because he didn't. You know what I mean? Like, he did in some scenes of some movies, like you mentioned earlier today. We were talking about Clockwork Orange. There's satire in that, but this is like a full-blown satire. And he's talked about how he said it was harder to keep it from being funny, which to me is something that a non-comedian would say. The comedy is easy. You just spray someone in the face with some like Coke or something. But the reality was way too close to the satire. And so he's worried that people would think the problems were just nonsense. So like he thought that it was a problem that he was doing like bat guano shit and people wouldn't get the satire. But he also put in the disclaimer about it being a complete fiction. So obviously he felt like he was walking on a tight rope. And I think that kind of informs a lot of the decision making in this movie. Sometimes they're just going for the joke, like, Dr. Strangelove can't help his one half of his body.
His arm is still a Nazi.
His right arm, who's still a Nazi. Yeah,
that's obviously a joke. There's a binder that says "World Targets and Mega Deaths." There's little like jokes.
I love there's a shot at the end where the army is killing the other army. And there's a big sign behind them that says, "Peace is our profession." Yeah,
there's also a sign in that scene that says, "Keep off grass," which I think is really funny. Like there's
it's
tiny,
like the ultimate punishment.
There's tiny little bits of production design that are clearly choices to be funny. Like it's
Simpsons
just like
sign jokes.
Right.
Yeah.
But on the other side, there's a scene where Slim Pickens is like after they verify Plan R, which is like the order to bomb Russia. The first thing he does to tell his men is that he says, "You're going to get accolades and positive personal citations and they're going to love you when you come back home." And it's kind of early. Like if you look at in terms of like the history of films that are talking about like anti-war films, 1964 is kind of early with a statement that the lower positions are kind of greedy. Like in the past, war films were either propaganda. You had like your John Fords and they were expendable and stuff like that. And then there was like some satirizations in anti-war films, but it usually attacked those in charge. So you can really see that, like by its times, even by today's standards, Kubrick really despised war and those who profited from it, even all the way down to like the grunt level. Yeah. And that's like
it's
in 1964.
Yeah,
you know,
like you'll see something like All Quiet on the Western Front, which is more like that World War I vibe, where you're like, the madness and tragedy of war,
right,
that we just can't escape. It's this crushing amorphous thing. And then you get later things like Catch-22 and Strangelove, where it's like, they're actually all pretty dumb. And that's the real problem. And that leads all the way to stuff like Three Kings, you know, and The like Wire. Generation Kill. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and even Jarhead, to a weird... Kill? No, I missed that one.
Oh, so good. It's worth going back for.
No, but that scene you mentioned about him talking about the accolades and everything, it comes like that is it's the punchline to a scene where he's talking about like I'm sure everybody's thinking some heavy thoughts about all of the people that have already lost their lives. Like it's this really heavy sort of like we have a job to do kind of speech. He's like, and by the way, if we do this right, you guys are gonna get medals.
It's gonna be a party.
Like, yeah. So they're like even that dynamic, like that juxtaposition of those two thoughts is like that's what's great about this movie too. It's like you were gonna do the serious stuff, and we're gonna talk very plainly about all the people that are gonna die and things that are gonna happen, the things that are at risk here. But also, like, I'm a big dummy that thinks it's cool we might get an award,
right?
You know,
just to throw the absurdity out there. And I think that's kind of the part and parcel of like Kubrick's like his success in satire, but also like we talk about him not being funny. I mean, we're also comedy snobs, so there's that.
Sure.
But but ultimately I think what it comes down to is that he was trying to navigate the space, and he did it pretty well. And he was very scared of the fact that I think he knew deep down he wasn't like naturally funny, but he knew like he was like, well, I have a good sense of humor, which is like all film directors in perpetuity.
I watched this with my lovely mother, and she didn't, at the point that they identified it as Burpelson Air Force Base, she said out loud, "Oh, is this a comedy?"
Yeah.
And like that's how subtle the actual humor is.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that line is so hard to like, that tightrope is tough to walk. It's kind of awesome. It's one of those things where I don't want to I do sound like that old fucking guy who's like, oh, but it's not like they don't make them like they used to. They absolutely do. But like, it's like, wow, 1964, they really did sometimes look at their audience and say, you're intelligent enough to get this, because you kind of have to do a lot of vaulting as an audience member to kind of get the machinations correct.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that the tightrope is there for sure, but in some ways, like Kubrick is sprinting across it. Like just thinking about naming the characters, because this movie, it also speaks to how he adapted books too, right? Like most of his movies are adapted from novels. Most, if not all.
He can't leave well enough alone. That's
but like, I mean, just taking The Shining, for example, and it's sort of famously a middle finger to Stephen King, right? Like, and just sort of picking an idea that he's like, here's the idea I like from this book, and just forgetting about the rest. But like the idea that he took this book that was all straightforward and serious, and then named characters Colonel Bat Guano and invented Dr. Strangelove for it. Dr. Strangelove himself wasn't in. There was like a team of physicists or whatever in Red Alert, but he sort of distilled them all down into a half former Nazi.
In really like feels like a grandfather of characters like the Professor on Futurama, and like even John Frank on The Simpsons. He's such an archetypal. Also established like this is the mad science. This is the vibe of a mad scientist. Yeah, he's a little weirdo freak. Look at him.
He's a little weirdo freak.
They argued, which has been popularized by things like The Simpsons and stuff. Like Dr. Strangelove, apparently, according to both Sellers and Kubrick, is not a parody of Kissinger, but Werner von Braun. who was kind of like, Operation Paperclip, German rocket engineer, all that stuff. But I don't know how he spoke, but like as soon as he opens his mouth as Dr. Strangelove, Peter Sellers is like iconic. Like it's immediately like something like that has been repeated so often that even us as babies of like the 80s, identify just through things like The Simpsons or just through all the references he said.
Right. It's the scientist telling everyone that society can survive. We just have to stock the mines with hot chicks that all the scientists get to bone. Right. I've heard that joke so many times in my life from different weird loser scientist characters.
Just 10 hot chicks per each of us, and we ought to be able to come right back out in 80, 90 years. Like,
since we have to be turgid all the time, we'll have to select hot chicks to like. They will have to be very stimulating.
Yeah, that whole conversation, and particularly because the ambassador he's like, yeah, okay, that's not bad. Like all pretense of nationalism is just gone, and he's like, no, I'm in. Let's do it.
Well, I believe, meanwhile, he's also immediately like taking photos.
He's
of the
still
war room,
taking
which
photos,
is moot at this point because they're all about to die, and they're talking about how they can't have a mine shaft gap.
Yeah,
like there can't be. Which, if you're unaware, listener, the nuclear gap was like. And this is the rock and a hard place of nuclear proliferation, right? If you're in a Cold War with another nation, it's like, well, maybe we should make it so that one person isn't in control of nukes and like you have to flip 3 keys that are all separated. Okay, what if your enemy doesn't do that and they're crazy and they do the easy fire nukes and they're ready to go at a moment's notice? All right, I guess we should have the dangerous version. Yeah. So it's like a game of chicken and I don't know that it so ended, much. Right?
No, I think we're still in it.
We still have those nukes. Yeah.
There's got to be
the fundamental truth about humanity, right?
Yeah,
it's crazy that we've moved on to other concerns largely when that still exists.
Well, and that's the other thing. I mean, going back to like how ballsy or not this movie was at the time to be making fun of potential nuclear Armageddon. Maybe, I mean, I wasn't around in the 60s. Like, I mean, other people clearly, because they were making the Pink Panther and other movies like that. I mean, Sellers himself was goofing off in every other movie he was in. So like, clearly it wasn't the 60s were defined by everybody was scared all the time from nuclear weapons. Like, so other stuff was around.
It does sometimes seem like a lot of it is that, though.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a fair bit.
I know. Yeah. I know.
Especially if you're a sci-fi like reader. From the time it was really loomed large. There's an Onion article I'll never forget, which was like, because you remember the Onion did Our Dumb Century where they did historic headlines, and one of them from the 1954 was like, sci-fi writers discover the bomb, and then the whole article is like, we'll use it, we're crazy, we'll use it in every fucking thing, which is a very niche joke just for me that I really appreciated.
That's what makes the Onion so great, is every headline in there is written just for you.
Yeah. Does anyone have a theory as to why it's titled after Dr. Strangelove? Why to this day I'm like, why is he the eponymous character? Do you think they saw the footage and were like, that's the hit character? That's a breakout character.
Honestly, I think it's just I mean, there might be I think a lot of it is a Peter Sellers effect. Probably like he was something of
a narcissist, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why he also didn't play
but
Kong,
so is
because
Kubrick.
he kept dicking around with Kong, and so Kubrick finally replaced him because they were having a weird pissing contest about it. But that might be based on some like the Peter Sellers weird biopic that Jeffrey Rush was in. Now that I'm thinking about it, which may or may not be true at all. Point is, I think partially because he's one of the most memorable characters, probably the most.
Yeah,
but then also like even just Strangelove has like there's, maybe it speaks to our strange obsession with killing ourselves to some degree, and it just sounds interesting. Like it, it pops. I'll say it.
Just Strangelove. Just no doctor, just Strangelove.
Just Strangelove.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is it?
It's also No. I'm just making a.
Oh, you're
It's
making
fine.
the Netflix joke or whatever.
When they
Yeah.
when they
The
remake
Netflix.
it, when Bezos remakes it for Amazon Prime.
I think he's also he's a perfect encapsulation of the absurdity that we've been talking about this whole time, right? He's like, these are the people in charge, these are the people making the decisions,
Right.
and so like that's kind of where the heart of the satire is. So that was probably it. But I think it's why not call it something like a name that represents that instead of a person. I don't know. It's probably the Peter Sellers effect.
Yeah,
I'll be honest. I think the weakest part of the movie is both parts of the title. Like, I just think Dr. Strangelove is not very clear, and How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Finally Love the Bomb or whatever. That sucks. I think they could have thought
it does suck because no one
brainstormed the title
actually
longer.
does stop worrying and love the bomb. No one actually
Slim.
does.
Yeah.
I guess, but
Slim-
he's like,
Slim's cool.
he was already into it before. He
I mean,
start worrying.
Oh, when
That-
he opens the safe, puts away his combat helmet, and takes out a cowboy hat, you're like, I get this character.
Yeah, this
I
is
know
my
what
guy
he's
right
into.
here. Yeah, I do think there's part of it that, like, I always read the subtitle as like from Kubrick, like that was Kubrick talking. Like I think that was that was
you're
him
making this movie.
that was him.
Bombs.
Him presenting the absurdity of the movie in the title. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I do think, like, going back to the tightrope idea, like, there's so many like checks and balances in this movie, like between just a goofy ass title to get you in the door. The poster is one of my all-time favorite posters. It's like that old
It's so
school,
cool.
with the president on the hotline and the kiss off has a woman draped over him, and
And there's that big shark coming up
and then
from the bottom.
and then the
what?
first thing that you
Also-
see is by the way, this can't happen, and then for the next hour and a half it's like, by the way, this for sure could happen, but here's a guy named Colonel
Chillingly
Batguano.
realistic. Yeah.
You know what else is that they were dipping into the James Bond of it all, even though it's not a spy parody at all or anything like that.
If anything, it's like a Jack Ryan genre more than a James Bond.
It's
Right.
just, but they did market it that way, so I wonder if that's why, like Dr. No or something like that.
Mhm.
Like they're trying to make you think of the machinations of German
Dr.
rockets
No
engineers.
Dr. No was out, but I think Goldfinger was also 64, so
Yeah.
it was all starting up right around the same time.
It was all starting up. Yeah,
It was
that's like
Dr.
the third one, I
Strangelove,
think.
James Bond, and Bob Newhart were the three big things in the 60s.
The three big things and the Cold War.
In the Cold War.
And Bob Newhart wasn't even supposed to be there that
It's
day.
all
It was a mix-up.
anything.
How
It
I
should've just been the
learned
two.
to stop worrying and love the Bob Newhart.
The Bob.
Bob love the Bob.
Dr. Newhart kind of
I-
also has
Yeah. I will say
What-
that the other thing that I always remember about this movie is the great story that I hope I never find out if it's actually true. I haven't done enough research,
Mhm.
but the thing about how George C. Scott didn't want to ham it up as much as he does in the movie.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
Kubrick was just like, nah, I tell you what, just do it in rehearsal. And then rolled camera on rehearsal
Rolled on
and
it.
used that whole thing. And George C.
I've
Scott
heard that
like never
too.
forgave him, or he was super mad about it.
Wow.
He was super mad at him. In fact,
As he might be.
in the same vein, so like when they were like, all right, well, we're not going to go with Sellers for Kong, we're going to go with Slim Pickens. Their first choice is John Wayne, and John Wayne, after reading the
Symbolic
script,
was
Right.
perfect.
was like,
But
absolutely,
but
not,
also famous
because. Yeah, but also famously like super conservative, super rah pro
Right.
like war essentially. George C. Scott is also that. I mean, the guy's fucking patent. His
Mhm.
image is exactly was that at the time. So the idea of him like doing a role on the war
That
room
they even
and,
got
like,
him is
Yeah.
nuts. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, he wasn't- he wasn't patent
probably
yet.
wasn't a big fan.
Um,
He wasn't, but he still was the
He
guy.
was still that
you know
guy,
what I
yeah.
mean?
I can
Um,
neither affirm or deny whether he was that guy at that time.
was he?
Well, I
patent
think
yet?
it's just what his beliefs. And it was
Yeah.
just I don't.
You mean he was a
uh,
conservative?
He's super
good old boy
conservative,
type
and
guy,
like
yeah.
he didn't want to do it
Yeah.
because he personally had problems with making fun of America.
Back when you
Uh,
could come up on Broadway and still be a conservative asshole.
Yeah,
What?
exactly.
So, do you know the story at all, Abe, of how Kubrick ended up in the director's chair for this then, and how he made those gets?
Oh, I don't know how.
Great.
Like, I just assumed he was
Lovely.
he was Stanley Kubrick just choosing his projects, but
Yeah.
I don't know if there is a story.
Well, at this point, it's what, his third movie? He did.
That's what I'm asking. What did he do before?
He did The Killing, Paths of Glory. I don't think in that order. I think The Killing with Sterling Hayden was immediately prior to this, so I don't think he was quite who he was. I mean, he didn't he did 2001
put him on the
Next
map.
in 68.
Fear and Desire, Killer's Kiss, The Killing, Paths of Glory, Spartacus, Lolita, then Doctor Strangelove.
Oh, okay.
So he'd already done Paths of Glory, Spartacus, Lolita. He can get whoever the fuck he wants.
Yeah, Spartacus got him in.
Yeah, this, and then 4 years later doing Space Odyssey, like, basically solidified him as like the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But like at this point, he's definitely like at the up and up. Paths of Glory, Spartacus, Lolita, as like in a matter of 5 years is pretty.
That's pretty good run.
Those went pretty bonkers. So
I was wondering while I watched this, like watching Dark Knight Rises, right? And you see those shots where Bane and his guys fall through the air into the plane and all that crap. And you're like, they really did this, those crazy bastards. They really did it. I really wonder if people in 1964 got that impression of the airplane footage in Strangelove, just because Kubrick is so lauded. And I have no good fix on whether the footage was ahead or behind its time, because I thought the flying footage looked shitty in this movie.
I did have that thought too. I'd never really watched it in the context of
comps are bad.
Yeah, I never really watched it thinking about what he made just 4 years later. Like 4 years after this movie comes out, he puts out 2001, which it's like you couldn't have made.
Or is it the equivalent of using clip art because you're trying to be funny?
Yeah,
was that intentional?
No. It's because he's mimicking the pro-war films of the previous 2 decades
that are shot terribly.
That are shot terribly in black and white. It's the same decision of why he shot in black and white, right?
Oh, sorry.
I would. I'd like to think so.
Good explanation.
That's a good idea. Yeah, good call.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That's that visual.
Okay, then
visual language that we're all familiar with.
The thing on my notes that I'm like, this must be addressed. For someone with so much control and so renowned for planning and like having such a message, or maybe it's just wanting to mess it up for comedy's sake, but. Can we talk about the weird improv ending and the fact that he kept that take, which is, if people have not seen it recently, it ends with Dr. Strangelove standing up out of his wheelchair because Peter Sellers was doing a take and got carried away and stood. And then to save the take, he improvises the line, "Oh my God, I can walk." They end the movie with that. That's crazy to me. That's like Apatow. And this is in the 60s.
It's just blow it all up.
Yeah. That you would blow it up to the degree that you end with an improv that's not even on theme. It has nothing to do with nukes.
Yeah, it's like in a sketch comedy, like someone pulling out a gun and just shooting everybody.
Yeah, or the cops showing up at the end of Holy Grail. Like, it really is breaking the system to a degree I did not expect.
Yeah, I don't know. So my opinion is all it is like, yeah, that's just. Kubrick is not that funny, and he left it in, and Sellers was just doing what he was doing, which is usually they cut that shit, you know?
I'm just surprised Kubrick didn't cut that shit. That seems like something Kubrick would cut or like curtail.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like also David Lynch being funny.
Yeah. I mean, this is the same dude that tricked George C. Scott this whole time. And like the way that he treated Shelley Duvall in The Shining is just a legend. Like, I hate stories about directors doing bullshit. Like, that's the one thing that, like, I like his movies, but I'm convinced he was a horrible asshole.
It's not
like to the point where I was like, I don't need to read a biography
Hitchcock
or anything. Like, I'm just like, you son of a bitch. That's just a mean thing to do to somebody. Like,
it's not necessary.
Yeah. And so it's like, I think the rule book by which he played was probably not as hard and fast as maybe we give him credit for. I mean, so like, if there's something that worked, like it worked. Like it's maybe he was like a
Slim Pickens cowboy that I'm thinking. I'm thinking of him as like operatic control.
I think he was to a certain extent, but like in this particular situation, like him being sort of defaulting to best idea in the room wins at some point. Like,
Yeah, like,
you know.
I don't know, that was funny. I want it to be funny.
I mean,
Let's put that in.
wasn't a lot of like Nicholson in The Shining, the all work no play makes Jack a dull boy scene? Wasn't most of that just Jack Nicholson going
Off the
insane?
cuff.
I think it was guided improv where he just said, you're just going to go insane. These are the beats, I believe.
Right.
The production designer
So, I mean,
typed it out.
there might
and
be
he was just like, I love it.
a version of this where like
Maybe he's a loosey-goosey guy. Yeah.
He trusted Peter Sellers at the very least, you know.
Well, actually, according to the internet, there's a copy of it where it does have a different ending and he didn't like it, so he tried to get rid of it.
Well, it's Tim Curry comes out and explains everything behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. And he did it. He's the bomb.
Yeah.
The war room basically explodes into a
it's the food fight. Yeah, the food fight.
It's a food fight. Yeah,
was...
because there's a large food table the whole movie, and Kubrick was like, I don't like it because it's too farcical.
Yeah,
I think
which
that's
is
funny.
hilarious.
Which is hilarious because
I think that's
Slim Pickens was later involved in that exact same ending in Blazing Saddles.
That's right.
And he's saying it's too farcical in a movie.
That's what I'm saying.
That takes place at Burleson Air Force Base.
Also, what did you replace it with? Yeah. You replaced it with him standing and declaring that he can walk now. So either he's a liar or you're just the rules break down.
But honestly, like that, the hard cut to the nuclear explosions, though, like it needs a non sequitur. Like for the entire. I mean, not for the entire movie to work, but like to keep with the theme of the whole movie of just like these
their attention isn't even on
these insane people with their eyes so far from the ball. Like having that non sequitur lead straight into hard cut to we'll meet again.
It is perfect chaos. How
it needs something that doesn't make any sense.
We're all gonna die. We could live in the mines. We should build nukes in the mines. Wait, I can walk nukes
because there's a thing about the food fight that there's some finality to it, like in a weird way.
Feels,
like you don't want finality. You want jagged.
know that they've completely regressed and they're literally throwing food at each other. Whereas this is like they're just gonna keep talking like this right up until the world blows up. You know,
so it uses, I think, its main comedic like maneuver, which it definitely shares with Brazil, is just it's both disturbing and funny when there is an existential threat and people seem chillingly unconcerned. You're like, why aren't you more worried? Where is the urgency?
Oh man, that scene is my favorite. I think from like a filmmaker perspective, just like getting my rocks off on like Kubrick's filmmaking, the scene with Mandrake where he goes into Ripper's office after finding a radio playing like the civilian music, and he's like, okay, so he starts off by saying more or less, oh good, so here's proof that like it's all a test or something, because like the civilians are fine, they don't know that there would be a different radio or it'd be off or whatever. He's like something then he's like, well, something must have gone wrong because Ripper's just quiet at this point. And then he's like, well, you can't still think this is real. And then he's like, I'm using my authority to relieve you of command. And then he can't get out of the room because the doors are locked, which is a joke. It's all one shot, right?
Yeah.
And then I love that the next three shots are just a single close-up of Ripper smoking, and he's just unfazed. And then an insert of him moving a newspaper to reveal a gun. Right. And then a shot of Peter Sellers sweating. And I just can't think of a better example of a scene that is like as bare bones editorially, it's just what's needed.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that is such a cool way to show like, wow, you see the entire film displayed in front of you. The madness is just because you're talking to a brick wall of logic. They just have made up their mind, and it's just, you don't even get a shot of them until you're like, all right, I'm done talking. There's no way you can get around what I've said. And he just says, here's a gun. And it's just like, well, fuck. Then everything.
And that's the scene that's got that shot. It's basically looking up at him from between his legs under the desk. Right. Like it's just a banana shot that's got no business being anywhere except for like, I don't know. I mean, it's just, he is a terrifying, that's not an angle that you ever want to look at a human face. and
Right.
Kubrick found it and used it in that scene, and it's weird, it's scary, and it makes me itch.
It's scary. Yeah, they were like, we're gonna put the camera right on your dick.
Yeah,
is that cool?
right.
Yeah.
And I insist.
And he said, I was about to ask why it's not there yet. Yeah.
You're seeing the whole big board.
Yeah,
Do you want me to put my dick on the lens? No. We'll get that.
Yeah.
We'll do it in post.
Between that and the close-ups with the wide angles that they used in the war room, like I'm always I'm so happy about those, just because you see how many other people are there. Like how many other people are in the room?
Extras. Yeah.
Well, but how many other people are in the room watching this and allowing it to happen?
All middle-aged white men.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just give me as many of the same looking motherfuckers that you can.
Executive bureaucrat motherfucker. Yeah.
Welcome to
put
the
him in a
60s,
gray
dude.
suit. Doesn't matter
Don
because it's black
Draper's
and
over
white
there.
anyway. Like just,
Right.
But they're all sitting there and not moving. Like even when you can see Strangelove in the background, he's not moving. Like everybody is just it's like a statue garden behind George C. Scott on every one of his shots, which is so cool.
Yeah, it's like a Renaissance painting.
Yeah.
That Kubrick does have an eye. I mean, he's an asshole. Fuck the man, right? But he did really have. There's this shot that this time around really did kind of fuck me up, which was that the footage of Ripper's men surrendering to the other soldiers in the weeds. Like it's actually like a really powerful shot, or at least it affected me. It like gave me a lot of suspense and worry that they like, shit, they're just gonna shoot him. I did actually forgotten that beat, and it was like because he shot it like telephoto. And he shot it like in a way that like felt more. It didn't feel like a movie. It felt like home footage of like Kent State
handheld
or something.
Like it was the only part of the movie that was handheld. Yeah,
it's far too real for the movie, frankly. But like a preamble to a terrible shooting, and it's just like that stuff is still super evocative because it does. Like I think it's got a timelessness for anyone who's seen any of that footage that goes along with like the horror of what's happening, along with like that kind of war photography style, like the telephoto lens and the low angle, like the
it looks
photographer.
like Vietnam news footage.
Yeah, because they're terrified. They're not going to stand up. They don't want to be in the line of fire and all that stuff. It speaks of volumes about like what's going on in that situation. And he's so good about like, when he takes off like the filmmaker hat of like, these are a scene and here's blocking, a guy walks in and then they have a conversation and this guy exits and someone else comes in, like all that filmmaking goes away when he just does a single shot of that kind of stuff. And it's just like, wow, that's really actually what he's good at. Like, I think that's Kubrick's superpower. It's not actually the normal filmmaking, what we call, where it's like basic sequence, where it's like shot, reverse shot and all that stuff. He's not that interesting when it comes to that. But like when it's just like take a photograph of what the situation is, or a postcard of what the problem you want to talk about is, and evoke a feeling, he can nail it.
He's got a real eye. Cinematographer's director in many ways.
Yeah.
Well, then, I mean, like there's an old saying, I can't remember where I've heard it, but I love it, except for every DP I've ever worked with hates it. But it's every shot's a close-up, right? Like, so just talking about like the shorthand of being able to communicate certain things with just the way you compose a shot or the way you use an edit or whatever. Like, in Lawrence of Arabia, there's a whole lot of close-ups of how lonely the desert is. Like, yeah,
exactly.
Those ideas that need to register quick on screen. Like, yeah, you're absolutely right, because like his will never be known for his editing, technique. But like that's not what he did. Like he put images on screen in a way that made you immediately feel something bananas. And he did it in every genre too. Like, I mean, he made a great comedy and he made a great horror movie and a great sci-fi movie. And like he's
right.
Like, he's not a guy whose style really adapts to a genre. Like, he just makes the genre, I think.
Yeah. I think it comes from like, well, what's going on? Well, what is a perfect rendition of that in a single frame? that evokes all the things I wish to evoke. It's like super dense, and he does it like once or twice in each of his films, and it's the ones we remember, you know? So there is that. I mean, credit where credit's due.
It's the one where the subtle stuff, like hooting and a hollering while you're riding a nuclear bomb down to the surface of the planet.
Right. That really shows the absurdity.
The real restraint of that sort of content.
Getting drunk and chopping your family up. You know, the subtle
stuff. Cinema verte, you know? Yeah, for sure.
Hell yeah.
What else?
I think that was a bracing Kubrickian conversation.
It felt like it to me.
That.
I don't have a what else, but if you do, Abe, I don't want to cut you off.
Nah, I don't. I don't.
Otherwise, I'm going to say thank you, Clint.
Dude, thank you.
Honestly, it's weird. I should have invited you on at some point while we overlapped at IGN. It's weird that it took this long, but
I wouldn't feel weird about it. Yeah, thank you.
This is my whole excuse to still talk with people, and this was great.
Right? Yeah, I miss. That's one of the chief reasons I miss having a podcast. It was just like it was an excuse to communicate with people I think are fun.
Well, you don't have a podcast, but your dulcet tones still do hit the interwebs regularly. Where can people find what you're working on nowadays?
They do, yeah. I'm still working at I'm at IGN. You can hear me over there. I manage Cinefix. You can hear me there practically all the time. And there, there's nothing imminent, but I'm always a threat to do something weird. We're working on we wrote part of I co-wrote 3 books several years ago, and the fourth book that we were going to write, we were going to do as an exquisite corpse. And then we decided to make it also a podcast. And boy, has it taken us a long time to actually do that. And it's silly even mentioning it because it's not going to be out anytime soon at all. But
what's that project called if people want to look at the original 3 books like me?
You can. They're all on Amazon. It's Not the End of the World is the first one, which is another weirdly apocalyptic book. It's about
I had to imagine, yeah.
It's about for 7 weeks, everybody thinks an asteroid is about to destroy the planet, and then it misses. And so everybody that thought it was the end of the world has to live with the shit that they did while they thought it was the end of the world. And we wound up having so much fun with that. We wrote 2 other related books. They're kind of a trilogy, but it's not the end of the world.
It just happens again over and over. They're like, this asteroid really this time.
But seriously,
it's super close.
We double checked the math. No, the second.
Did you say meters? Oh, we're good.
Oh, you forgot it was in meters. That's great.
But yeah, you can find those on Amazon. They're fun. And then at some point, we'll put out the next one, which is called "Oh Shit, Vampires." So really, really heady stuff.
Yeah,
fun stuff.
Yeah,
awesome. All right.
Yeah,
I think that's all we got.
Okay.
This is going to be on the free feed, so thanks for listening. If you want to check out some of our super bonus secret shows that are behind the paywall, like Star Trek The Next Futurama and Spiel Boys, you can find those over at patreon.com/smallbeans. Otherwise, you're already at the right spot.
You're here. You made it. Congratulations.
And the experience is over, so the interchange is done now.
It's honestly, it's weird that you're still listening.
Yeah.
If you are listening on the Patreon feed, which comes out, all of our stuff comes out earlier, next week we have a new show coming out that will be also behind a paywall. I don't think we're announcing it yet. I mean, we could.
That's fine. Yes,
but I'm just saying, look,
double back.
More reasons to do the Patreon is all I'm saying.
Well, once we get off the air, let's circle back about the packaging and the headline and all of that fun stuff.
Sure. Yeah, we'll A/B test some stuff and we'll beat it out.
Great.
Shut it down.
Lose the grid. Illusion job.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!